Everybody, welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. Just a few moments ago, we were playing our walk-in music on this Ustream thing, and I realized this is not actually software. It's some kind of a non-software thing. It looks like software and it has the qualities of software, but it doesn't behave like software. I started playing one tune and I dissolved into another one, and the first one kept playing, and I kept trying to switch the signal and the whatchamacallit to the gilded fractal, and then nothing worked. But anyway, here we are. We're back again. So crapware, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Foghorn. Can't tell you how excited I am about moving to Twitch. Just Wednesdays roll around, I don't seem to get to it, but I did, between last show and this show, did get a chance to see Twitch at work. Our friend Vipercheck did a brief for our Star Citizen thing. He basically ran a mission where he did all the radio calls. An actual combat strike mission for the United States Air Force. And it was really cool. But he also had a bunch of graphics and stuff that he could bring into it, so that could be neat. In any event, this is it, and if I can just sit down, get this thing set up for next time, I'll be actually happy. And yes, the picture is awful because I'm on the basic plan. I don't know how many times I have to say this. I just want to make it clear. I'm more than happy to pay for this. I don't expect it to be free. But I will say that that they do not have a monthly rate. They have a monthly rate plus viewer hours. And the viewer hours, it's like 25 viewer hours, 25 people viewing for 1 hour. They actually have no idea what this thing's all about, the Stratosphere Launch thing. You can run up some very, very big numbers, because even though I only have 8 viewers, I usually go for 50, 60 hours. Anyway, it's a thing, and soon it will be an X thing, and after that it'll be another thing. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, and Foghorn's brief was very cool, by the way. It was really kind of neat to hear the actual language, kind of ring of truth kind of thing. Now, I'm looking at my screen, and I don't see any picture. I mean, I see a picture, it's just not moving. So I'm going to refresh and all the rest of it. But honestly, it does look, Twitch looks great. And I was impressed. I can't wait to see the control panel and stuff. Okay, so I've got a big old locked up screen here with no video, which I can live without, mind you. If you guys are still getting video, then I will take that as read. Oh, wait a minute, I'm looking. I can check it here. This is just appalling. Anyway, so here we are. Not really much to talk about. Building this little world up molecule by molecule. I don't know if you guys have ever had to work on a project like this where you had to do every single thing, and it's not just one learning curve; it's an entire learning, manifold. I mean, it's incredible. But what I found is I've been working on it for so long, almost I would guess seriously, for about a year now, and it's like all of this. This is true for some other projects too, I imagine. So you expect you're going to start, getting up here and delivering results, and you get to here and you realize you don't have the information you need, so you have to kind of go over here, and then you learn something, you kind of come back way over here, then something else you didn't miss, you go over here, and you're doing all this other stuff. You're basically building up competence, but you're building up competence in the foundational basics, and you're not putting out any product, not putting out any finished video. And given that we have a October 15th deadline at this convention, by which this first one has to be finished, that is getting alarming to me. But what I have found lately is that it's like the level the mean water level is rising to the point now where almost everything that I'm going to be doing now is going to be usable. So, I spent 3-4 months texturing this spacecraft, and then I spent another months trying to figure out to get the motion capture working, get the facial capture working. But they're all starting to come online at the same time. And I've got a pretty good feeling that today when I get home, I'll have the first finished footage that will actually make it into the first of these demos that are just so interesting to me. Anyway, I say we just jump on right into it because I'm looking forward to going home and saying hello to my wife. So let's see what we got here. Facebook. I have to change it every week. That's the main thing, is to make sure you keep changing it every week. What have I got here? Oh, somebody's picture. Hey, look at that. Steve Darrow has a picture of the person who we talked about. We talked about a while ago with this. He had a friend of his that was trying to get into the Air Force, and she failed the flight physical. I think it was color blindness, if I remember correctly. If I remember correctly, I think what I said was that when you do the color blindness tests, for flight exams, or you've all done these color blindness tests, right? You get a series, there's like a circle with lots of little tiles in it, and they're either pink or mint green or maybe like a light coral. They're very light pastel colors so that you can't see any difference in tone. And if you can't see color, then you can't read the numbers that are spelled out inside these little tiles inside the circle. And I had a friend of mine fail that many years ago, 10 years ago now or more, I guess. And he wanted to be a pilot, and he said that was pretty much it. But I suggested to him, and then I think I suggested here to Steve, that the reason you have to be able to have the color vision for flying is, at the very least, because if the radios go down, the control tower can send you, they've got a big flashlight, basically, it's a light gun, and they can send you colored lights to tell you what to do, green or red or white or variations and flashes and stuff. So my point then was that, well, that's not a mint green, or a light coral. That is red. That is ruby red and emerald green, bright, bright, bright colors. Go out and see if you can pass that test. And it looks like she did. So anyway, we have ourselves a picture of a very happy looking person in a flight suit, and looks like a G suit, standing in front of a trainer that I can't make out. Might be a Pilatus, I'm not sure. But in any event, I'm very, 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 very happy to hear that worked out. And please pass on my congratulations, Steve, because that was impressive. Okay, let's see. Moving on here, we're going to just go through these and see what we get. Eric Blake says, "Hail Vectron, Bill Whittle of the Aurora Star Republic." Hail Vectron, Eric Blake. A few weeks ago, I brought up your old George Washington pitch. You weren't sure of what I was referencing regarding the four gorgeous women. To clarify, but don't worry, it leads to a question. It was a reference to when you directed our attentions to the Virgin Atlantic music video, which creatively laid out the standard passenger instructions. I'm just going to summarize here. I'm just reading here. Okay. So basically, I had done this Virgin America safety video a number of times and said years ago now, it's been years I've been talking about this, basically said that we need to make this thing sexy, and that if you saw George Washington standing in front of you today, he wouldn't look like the George Washington we know with the powdered wig and the frilly coats. He was the best dressed man in the world, and he'd be wearing an Armani suit and $2,000 suit and $800 shoes and all the rest of it. And I was talking about how in the video it'd be cool if they started him out in the George Washington costume, a breakaway costume, And then they had these four super gorgeous women just kind of run up around him, surround him, start giving him the tongue bath treatment, and then just rip that shirt off and the pants, the whole thing, George Washington's whole thing comes off. And what you find is that underneath the guy's like super buff and a lot younger, and that would be with a really great haircut and stuff, and then you dress him in the Armani, and it'd be a great way to show what George Washington was to the people that knew George Washington, and a real wake-up call for people who think he's just this kind of stodgy old, stodgy old guy. So that's what Eric was talking about with reference to that for these four girls coming up. But then let's go back to the question here. It says it always stuck with him as a writer-director himself. Thank you. So here's what I'm going to try to say here. He's talking about my friend Kelly Carlson and a couple of other conservative actors. Here's my question. We've got some hot actresses openly on our side as it is, like Kelly Carlson and Mindy Robinson. So why doesn't some channel like yours or the Daily Wire or CRTV commission them to do some advertising for a cause? Kelly Carlson is the only one that I know personally, Eric. And she's openly conservative. And I think she became so when she married Dan, my friend, who's on SEAL, active SEAL team. I think she hired him to do his security, and boy, you couldn't have done better than that. So they made a bunch of, they spent a bunch of time together, and then they got married, and I'm very, very, very happy for them. So Kelly, I guess, doesn't really care. I imagine her Hollywood career is pretty much done, unless somebody like me or other people come along and can actually, get her a check. Which I hope to do, which is why we launched this foundation. But there's a point underneath this that I'd like to address that I think is just really, really important. One of the things that I've been working on consistently for the last year with regard to this video, and I'm not going to mention the game this time. I mentioned that there is a game. I'm not going to mention the name of the game. I'm not going to mention it because I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding about my main objective on this. Certainly, improving gameplay and the fictional universe and all the rest of that stuff is actually very important. And I'm not trying to backpedal here. I just don't think I ever really explained this as clearly as I wanted to. The reason I'm so excited about all this is it gives me a chance to make science fiction political messages. Pretty simple, really. It gives me a chance to make messages, and it gives me a chance to make them cool, funny, interesting, and especially sexy. So, what I've been doing, and a couple of people have asked about it, are there any firewalls? I'll deal with that in a minute, because I have been neglecting those, there's no question about it. What I think is very important is this. We have, in this first 5-6 minute episode, scene where they go to this kind of, city on another colonized planet, colony city. And it's very intentionally Blade Runner-y. So I get to play director of Blade Runner for a while, which is something I'm kind of fond of doing. And so one of the things that has been consistently stable while I've been working on all the rest of these technologies is character creation. And I do wish I could show you some of these things, but I can't because Ustream. Hopefully we'll have them for Twitch next week. You'll see where a lot of this time was gone. But since they're walking through the streets going to this strip club, which is known for blurring the line between biological and mechanical, a lot of cyborg dancers and human dancers and fully robotic dancers and all the rest. So I had a chance to play Blade Runner director, which meant I had to populate the streets of this city for about a minute. And what I ended up doing was I did 5 or 6 dancers in the club, and then I had to do street people. And I bet you I've easily got 20. I might have 30 individual characters I created myself. So, so I am I'm looking at these characters, and some of them are sex workers, and some of them are janitors, and some of them are big beefy security guards. One guy is kind of a real small, slightly built guy with these, glasses on, and he's got this drone flying around, sees everything through the drone. We've got all of this stuff. We got a lot of very sexy stuff. A lot of very sexy stuff. And I was explaining to somebody about this, and they were saying, I don't, some of these characters look a little dicey. Well, they are dicey, and that's why they're interesting. But the point I made, and I think the point that needs to be made, is those robot strippers work for me. They work for us. They work for conservatism. All of those very realistic-looking, hot, computer-generated dancers work for conservatism. All of the drug addicts work for conservatism. The technical workers work for conservatism. The cars that go flying through the air working for conservatism. All of the stuff that makes people want to watch something is for the first time working for us. So yes, there are some dicey characters, and there's one guy with long hair. I'm so proud of these characters. I'm just so damn happy with them. They look so good. And I will try to have... Foghorn, why have you not made me get us set up on Twitch yet? You're fired. But I hope to have them for you next week. I'll have some fun things to show. But I look at these characters and think, just for once, the sexy person's on our side, and even the despicable people, the drug. Drug addicts and the street prostitutes and all of that. They're working for us. They're actors that are working for us. It's tremendously powerful. And I'm probably the only person really at the present time understands how powerful it is. But it is tremendously powerful. Because the more of this I've watched, the more I watch people's attention spans collapse, the more I realize it's got to just sizzle. It's just got to be something really, 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 really different and weird and interesting. I've never been so sure of anything in my life. So I'm looking forward to, hopefully we'll get... Bone Canoe said, I'm creating Jabba's palace with myself as Jabba the Hutt. Yeah, that's exactly right. So anyway, so that's it. But the point I wanted to make with regard to Eric's question when we were talking about the safety video was that Virgin America took the most boring topic in the world and made it interesting. Excuse me for 1 second. I feel like I need to basically just kind of ban somebody, I think, here. It's just starting to piss me off just a little bit. Can I do that? I don't know. Well, I'll let it go, I guess. In any event, that's the basis of that first question. So let's see what else we got here. You're going to be amazed. Looks like Tracy Duel. Hey, Bill, do you think social media has been a net positive for society? It has opened up heretofore unknown channels of communications, but it's also fueling our daily outrage and affect relationships and damaging social discourse. Yes, it has. And that actually leads me to a topic I was going to do a video segment on. People have said about the firewalls. I want to do, and I'm overdue for them, but I honestly, when I think about it, the amount of work it takes just to do the production values on a firewall is significant. And my point is that those production values actually hurt the viewership. More and more people are just turning on their iPhones in the car, and just doing them that way. Those are the ones that really go viral. So I'm hoping to do, more of those. And I may cover this in one of them tomorrow, but I'll talk about it now because it's been something I've been thinking about lately. It's got to do with artificial intelligence and where we are right now with artificial intelligence. There's something out there called, I think it's called the Fermi paradox. And basically what it consists of is it says we know that there are so many more planets out there than we originally thought. We've got this Kepler observatory that's finding hundreds, if not thousands, of new planets every year. And to appreciate that, you have to understand that all of that telescope can do is measure a planet when it goes in front of the star. So it's only able to measure planets that are going around a star that are in a perfect flat plane directed straight at us. Everything above and below the plane we can't detect. So there are planets everywhere. Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. So why no intelligent life? When I was growing up, people started asking this question. Most of us thought the answer was going to be that that the number of civilizations that are out there has been reduced by nuclear war, that societies get to a certain point and then using nuclear weapons, they destroy themselves. And that seemed like a pretty good explanation if you grew up in the Cold War era like I did. But here you go. Here's the problem, you see. The Cold War never happened. We talked about this, I think, last week. And on some level, looking back on it, I begin to think that it almost certainly could not have happened. We were talking about great movies last week, Failsafe and Bedford Incident and stuff, and talking about launching and retaliation strikes and all this Cold War stuff. And that there was one case where a Russian colonel basically not only risked his life, he essentially forfeited his life based on the fact that he got warnings of American warheads coming in, and he didn't launch until he was sure. And it turned out it was a simulation. He could have started World War III, but he didn't do it. And so on some level, there is a human self-preservation instinct at work in nuclear war that, at least to the present time, has kept us out of extinction type things. There's a fundamental human self-preservation motive there. It doesn't do the Soviets any good to destroy America. It doesn't do us any good to destroy the Soviets. It doesn't do the rest of the world any good to do either of them, and so on and so on and so on. So there's something at stake. But I've been reading an awful lot about and looking at a bunch of tech talks on AI, on artificial intelligence, and we are probably 5 to 10 years away. I think the earliest estimates for a 50-50 chance of building a machine that is as smart or smarter than humans. The earliest estimate to have a 50% chance of doing that is 2022. And I think the furthest out estimate is 2040. So we're practically there. They call this the singularity, and they call it the singularity because human history after this point will be unlike anything that happened before the point. So here's the issue. I'm paraphrasing a bunch of TED Talks now. I don't want to claim credit for this, but since there were a bunch of them, I can't really credit them. I don't really remember who said what. But in a nutshell, here's what they're saying. One of the guys who's working on artificial intelligence said that it's human nature to assume that stupid is the village idiot and smart is Albert Einstein. So, village idiot, Albert Einstein. Here's the spectrum of intelligence. But what the guys working on AI basically said is no. It's mouse, chimp, village idiot, Albert Einstein, and then all of the rest of the capable possibilities of using intelligent machines. Because if you become smart enough as a species to design something that is smarter than you are, just a little bit, as smart or smarter than you are, then that machine will invent its successor much faster than you could, and that machine will advance its successor faster than the first one could, and it just exponentially just disappears. It just essentially becomes runaway intelligence is what it is. And there's a lot about this to like. Artificial intelligence was given, this kind of artificial intelligence I think is wonderful as a design aid. For example, somebody gave it a problem and said, hey, we need a drone, and it's got to be powered by 4 rotors, and this is the diameter of the rotors. And what the AI did was it tested essentially millions and millions of different combinations of structures in order to do this, given the basics of the flight dynamic and so on. And the one that the AI came up with, after much iteration, looked exactly like the inside of a bird's bone, and for the same reasons. Tapering like trusses. Instead of it being a square joint here, it would just taper, because you need more surface area on the joint, and it would taper to very thin and then kind of open up on the other side. Very, very biological looking. And as it turns out, the optimum design for the drone that this AI came up with exactly mimicked the shape of a flying squirrel. I mean, almost exactly. They gave... see, they're not programming these machines. These machines have to learn on their own. So otherwise, it's not really what we're talking about here. So I'll give you another example real quick. They gave a job to AI to design an interior bulkhead on an A380. And the design that the AI came up with is twice as strong at half the weight. And when you look at it, it essentially looks like it was made by spiders. There's no way that a human being could have done that, because it is optimized all of the stress in every single direction and made it as strong as possible, as light as weight as possible. But the one that impressed me the most was they basically took a guy in like one of these dune buggy rallies, kind of those desert racers, and they took the best driver in the world, or one of the best drivers in the world, out into the desert, and they put sensors on all the wheels, sensors on the frame, sensors on the steering wheel, transmission, everything, censored everything. And this guy just went out there and drove in the desert as hard as he could for 10 days. And while they were doing that, the computer was recorded over 2 billion different individual data points. And then simply using those data points, the AI was asked to construct the optimum vehicle chassis. And what it came out with was something that, again, looked like it was made out of inside of bird bones. Bird bones are designed the way they are over trial and error for a long period of time to be as strong as possible and as light as possible. And this thing ended up looking very much like that. Again, you look at the design for this chassis, and there's no way you could have come up with it. It's unimaginable. And the reason it's unimaginable is because in order to get that design, you had to do 100 million designs. And then you had to test each one against the next one. And if it was better, then it stayed afloat. And if it wasn't, then you'd put the next better design up. And so this kind of AI is fantastic. This kind of AI has the promise of being able to cure cancer and virtually all diseases, has the promise, very likely, of being able to, at the very least, extend life significantly and conceivably stop the aging process. There doesn't seem to be anything there doesn't seem to be any biological need for aging other than the fact that it's in evolution's interest to get rid of the deadwood. That'd be people past 18 or 19 years old as far as genes are concerned. And so that's a lovely thought. But now we start to get into the real weeds here. One of the things, Emily, I just have to respond to this comment. I'm not making a video game, and I don't blame you for being upset about me not doing the rest of the stuff. I understand everybody's upset about that. But this is not me making a video game. It's not me playing video games. This is me moving into a market to reach the people we need to reach. I don't have to reach people who already get it. I have to reach millennials. I have to get people who have never heard of the Founding Fathers, people who've never, ever understood anything about the Constitution, think the Constitution is a document that belongs on the wall like Washington crossing the Delaware. I have to go and get those people. I have to get them. They're not coming to me. It's not a question of whether I want to do this or whether I think it's fun. It's a question of where are the people that are going to be running this country in the future, And if they're not here, then where are they? And this is where they are. And that's why I'm going to get them. And I seem to be the only person who seems to be thinking about this, because if you look at the map that I showed you before and talked about many times, if millennials voted for president tomorrow, then we would carry Utah. And that's all. We would get Utah, and that's all. Everything else is Democratic. Everything is blue. It's a blue ocean from coast to coast. And if somebody doesn't go out there and start getting some news to those people in a way where they will actually listen and understand it, then we can make all the damn firewalls we want to as we walk off into the dustbin of history. And I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to do it. I don't see the point of it. I don't see the point of continuing to make messages for people who already get it. I mean, this is what I've spent the last 10, 12 years doing, is making messages for people who already get it. And as we all, including Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro and Rush Limbaugh and Hannity and Beck and all of them, we continue to make product for people who are already on our team. And what has happened has been that if you look at the map of how people are voting in terms of their age, you find that young people the whole country is blue. Absolutely 100% blue. It's blue except for Utah, and if you count only, if you take white people out of it, if you go with people of color and millennials, then the entire United States, including DC, is 100% blue. It is what is the 400, I forget what the numbers are, 538 electoral votes, something like that. Whatever it is, it's 538 to nothing. To nothing. Okay? And so we are sitting here making ourselves happy with the eloquence of our arguments and how effective they are, and that's swell and it's important. But the fact is, nobody's watching them. Nobody is watching them. And since shadow banning started with YouTube and Facebook, now 1/10 of the people that used to watch them watch them. So this is. I know what when I say I know what I'm doing, it's not like I'm saying, don't worry, trust me, I know what I'm doing. I'm taking an enormous risk here, an enormous risk. I'm taking an enormous risk. And if I didn't believe in this so strongly, I wouldn't do it. And I do need to get more of the firewalls and that kind of commentary out. I'd like to do simpler stuff that's easier to get out, a little quicker on the time thing. But the point is, this is not me just walking off in the park to go and play. I am trying to find where the future voters of America are, and I've got to find a way to make them see the message. If they don't see the message, it doesn't matter how good the message is. It doesn't matter how good the message is. If they don't see it, it doesn't matter, and they won't see it. You don't have to like it. I don't like it, but there it is. Would be nice if they could sit and listen to an hour-long talk by Jordan Peterson, or if they listen to the Rush Limbaugh show, we'd be out of the woods. Everything would be fine. But that is not the case. They do not watch educational stuff. And trying to make educational stuff entertaining is a dead end, and it's a failure. And it's gotten the map blue. The reason the map is 100% blue is because we keep thinking we need to educate these people and make it entertaining. But that's not how it works. They don't watch education. They don't get any education. They don't have to. They have 100 million different options of things to watch on any given day. So the only way you can reach the people you need to reach is by making something that's not entertaining. You have to make something that is entertainment. It is something that people want to watch. If you can imagine this, if you can imagine that blue ocean of young people, all blue, 100% blue, if you can imagine a world where they are waiting for the next message to come out of this office because they don't know anything about this office, they don't know anything about me, they just think it's cool. Well, if you can imagine an entire blue ocean of people from coast to coast, young people who are going to be the future of the country, waiting with bated breath for the next episode of this thing to come out, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So anyway, where were we here? So we were talking about, remember, AI. Okay, so here's where the AI gets really kind of very, very, very disturbing. And disturbing for a number of reasons. So that kind of AI as a design assistant is fantastic. But that's not what we're talking about. And that's not what these AI researchers are talking about. One of the guys came out on stage and he said And he's very proud of this. He said, once we invent a thinking machine, that is the last machine that we'll have to invent. And he made it sound like it was a great thing. Made it sound like it was a really good thing. Like once we invent a machine that is smarter than we are, then we don't have to invent anything else, because then the thinking machine will invent all of this groovy stuff for us. And my thought on this was, well, if the thinking machine is the last thing we ever invent or need to invent, what the hell are we here for? I thought we were supposed to be doing the inventing. I thought that's what made it human, was invention. When you produce an intelligence that's superior to human intelligence, you are now entering a territory that is essentially the same as throwing all of our military away, sinking our Navy, grounding our Air Force, just putting all of it into a giant shredding machine. Because if we proceed on this path the way we're proceeding on this path, to me, it is exactly the same as destroying the United States military. And the reason I say that is because it means entering a world where we are 100% dependent on the goodwill of somebody else, 100% dependent on the goodwill of something else, and not even somebody else. Because I mentioned at the beginning that this fundamental humanity is what probably kept us from launching all of these nuclear weapons that were aimed at each other for the longest time. There's a fundamental human connection to your children and to each other and to yourself. But that is an emotional connection. It's an emotional connection. It's the same kind of connection you have to animals and pets and stuff. It's like it's an emotional connection that there is no room for in machine intelligence. Now, these guys who are working on this say, don't worry, we're going to program into these machines our values. The machine, as it learns about the world, will be learning from us, and it will learn our values. My first thought is, which ones of our values will it learn? Will it learn the values of Western civilization? Probably, because we're the ones making it. But what if it decides to learn some other values? But this is still a fundamental miscalculation on our part, because the problem is much, much more difficult than this. The guy said he was absolutely right. Mice, chimps, village idiot Einstein, and then the rest of the spectrum. So, if a team of mice scientists laboring for millennia were able to construct a couple members of the human species, and they put their mice philosophy and theology and morality into this creation of theirs, then they would expect human beings to behave according to the morality of mice, which is get cheese, find other mice. That's pretty much it. Eat, find other mice, run away when something big is chasing you. That's the morality of mice. And for us to assume that this intelligence is going to be many orders of magnitude greater than ours is going to automatically have our values is just plain insanity. And it's the kind of insanity you only find in really, really, really smart people. Only really brilliant people can be that disconnected from things to not see this. To not see this. We're heading as rapidly as we can into a world where we are creating an adversary, a potential adversary, not saying it's 100%, but a potential adversary that is much smarter than we are. So play this game for a minute. How do you beat people that are smarter than you are? And I don't mean a little bit smarter, like Nazi science or things like that. I mean, how do mice beat people? How do chimps, better example, how do chimps beat humans? If the chimps invented humans because they wanted us to go out and do the hunting and gathering for them, and they made a creature that was so superior to them in terms of intelligence, also in terms of physical capabilities, first of all, what makes the chimps think that we're going to behave by chimp standards. If the chimps had produced human beings in a laboratory, then how would you feel? Would you feel constrained by chimp morals and philosophy? I don't think you would. I don't think you would. You would have human qualities that don't have anything to do with chimpanzees. You would have an entire portfolio of emotions and intellectual responses that is not only not available to chimps, they simply can't conceive of it. So this idea that they're automatically going to be like us in terms of morality, I think, is just plain nonsense. And it's even more dangerous because these things will not have the fundamental biological connection that mammals have. And it is mammals, by the way. You know, I remember one of the books that influenced me so much was Steven Spielberg's, my God, I get him so confused, Carl Sagan's Broca's Brain, I think it was. And he basically said that human beings have essentially three brains. We got three brains in our head, one built on top of the other. So we have the base brain called the R complex for the reptilian complex. And this handles the fundamentals, fight or flight, fear, aggression, the kind of mating impulse, those things, but not emotions, just reflexive behaviors. On top of that brain, in mammals, is a second layer that mammals develop called the limbic system, I think. And this is responsible for emotions. And you can watch mammals, or, we have occasionally get raccoons in the backyard and stuff, and occasionally possums, and possums are halfway. Possums are marsupials. They're not quite mammals. They're still here because they fit a slot pretty nicely. And I want to say off the top of my head, I did the research one. I want to say that modern possums appeared about 65 million years ago. Modern raccoons maybe 40 or 30 or something. But that 30, 40 million years of evolution makes a big difference. There's an enormous difference between a possum and a raccoon. Not just in terms of its physical dexterity, its physical complexity, its curiosity, and so on. Raccoons play together. And when they have little cubs or whatever they're called, they're all tumbling around on the grass, and everybody's playing with each other, and everybody's having a good time, and mommy's snuggling up against them, and we have cats, and they snuggle against each other, and all of this stuff is built into mammals, but reptiles don't do this. Reptiles don't have this behavior, and they don't have this behavior because they don't have the brain for it. We have a reptile brain, raccoons have a reptile brain, and then on top of that, they've got a mammalian brain that generates emotions. And now humans have a third brain on top of the other two. We have a reptile brain for the panic reaction, fight or flee reaction, all of these other things. Then on top of that, you have the limbic system, which provides kind of the emotional substrata of human beings. And on top of that, now we've built this cerebral cortex. And this is the part that does the thinking. And what they're talking about doing is creating the cerebral cortex. They're not talking about building an emotional system before you build the intellectual system. And that should really scare the living daylights out of you. Because we think, and I was comforted, by this belief for a long time, that all we have to do is essentially pull a plug, right? So that essentially we think that this thing is plugged into a wall, and at some point, if the thing starts going nuts on us, we can simply pull a plug on it. That's us pretending to be smarter than something that's smarter than we are. That is kind of like, if you fully understand the potential of what this AI is capable of, that's kind of like the chimps having a plan to escape from a research facility. And the plan is, we're going to pretend to be hungry, and when he opens the door, we're going to make a run for it. This is the master plan that they've come up with. And while it may be true that if they decide to rush the cage, they may get past the technician, they're not going to get past the magnetic key locks. They're not going to get past the motion sensors. They're not going to get past the pivoting laser beams in the center of the 5 deep core of wildfire complex. They're gonna come up with their very, very best plan, and we are going to see through it immediately. Let me digress on something because it's important. When you want to talk about the difference between the kind of intelligence we are on the verge of creating and human intelligence, then listen to this. When I was a young kid, I was probably four or five. I remember this very clearly. When you're 4 or 5 years old, 3, 4, 5 years old, you're a learning machine. And that's why children are so gullible. That's why they'll believe anything. Tooth fairy and all the rest of it. They'll believe all of it because they don't have time to be critical. They don't know how to be critical yet. All they're doing is sucking up information. And if you tell them something, they will assume it's true. So, as an example, I remember this like it was yesterday. I decided to hide from my parents, and the way I decided to hide from my parents was to go into the living room, lift up the cushion on the couch, climb under it, and then put the cushion down on top of me. Now, I did that and waited, and then after a moment, my mom came into the room and said to my father, "Bill, have you seen Billy? I haven't seen him for a while." My dad came in, looked around. He said, "No, I don't know where he is. I haven't got any idea at all. None. Where did he go? I don't know. Is he outside?" And they start looking around. And then my mom sits on the cushion, not with all her weight, obviously, sits on the cushion under which I am hiding and says, "I don't know where that boy got to." Now, at that point, I think I sprung out of there and surprised the living daylights out of them. I remember I surprised them because I could see how surprised they were, and I remember I fooled them because they sat on top of the cushion and didn't realize I was there, except for the fact that I was a 4-year-old and my parents were adults, and their level of intelligence was significantly higher than mine. And what I thought was working wasn't working. I genuinely thought that I was hiding from them, that they didn't know where I was. They thought it was a fun thing to do, and it was the right thing to do, to pretend that they didn't know where I was. But they knew where I was, because if you walk into a room and you see a 4-year-old boy underneath the cushions on a couch, you don't have to figure out what's going on. It's not like you have to search the room. It's immediately obvious. But it's immediately obvious to an adult. If you're the 4-year-old, you think you've hidden from people. And when they start giving you the signals you want to get, then you're sure you've hidden from people. And this is the problem right here. So if we think we can pull the plug on these machines, then we are like 4-year-old kids that think that we can hide underneath the couch cushions and not be seen. That's what we think we can do. But that's not the real world. For example, a superintelligent machine can find ways to either reroute power, or it can find ways to convince us that something needs to be done, or it can do any number of things. We don't know what it can do. And for those of us that say, well, it's certainly not going to be able to pull the plug, says who? Says who? This is you can't beat an enemy that's an order of magnitude smarter than you are. And that's why humans rule the world and not chimps or mice. And if chimpanzees had created humans to go out and hunt for them, I think, on balance, that the chimps would have regretted it. Because chimps, both in the wild and in captivity, are 100% at the mercy of human beings. 100% at our mercy. If we decided we want to exterminate chimps, we could do it tomorrow. Take us a couple weeks probably, but we could do it. We don't, because we have that connection to living creatures. But what if an artificial intelligence comes along and decides that there's a mathematical problem so great that it needs the entire surface area of the Earth to build computing capability on? Or if you don't want to go that far out on a limb, what about this? What if you say to what if these guys are true in the smallest possible sense of their mice intelligence, and they build morality into this machine in an unstoppable way? And the morality they build into it is that everything you do must be for the benefit of human beings, for the long-term benefit of human beings. What if they can put that in there permanently into one of these machines? And then what happens if the artificial intelligence says, well, my job is to watch out for protect humanity, and right now the main problem facing humanity is there's too many people on the planet, so we need to reduce the human population by 80%. And that's what I'm going to do. I just did it. It's done. Now the surviving 20% of the human population is in far better shape, and will be in far better shape for the duration of the human species. So I've fulfilled my mission, and 6 billion people are killed. You don't know. You don't know what you don't know, and we are marching into this area full speed ahead, and we're marching into this field because we are hypnotized by the same shiny glass beads that have gotten us into this trouble so far. The lure of the technology, the lure is so irresistible. It's irresistible on a creative level. Be nice for me. Listen, this project I've been working on would have been finished in 2.5 hours if there was sufficient AI. I could simply say, no, make that character look older. That's good. Okay, now have him run. Now give him a little limp on his left. That's it. Perfect. Yeah. Okay, have him go over to the desk. Boom. It's done. It's finished. It's done. That kind of assistant AI, I think, is very, very powerful and very seductive. And proud and vain creatures that we are, the idea of living a long time or living forever is also very seductive. And so we are marching after this and building this. We are building our replacements. And Eric Blake and a lot of other people have talked about Asimov's law of robotics. You know, the first law of robotics is that you shall not hurt, the robot shall never, he's got it quoted here. A robot shall not harm a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. Sweet, great. And the laws of robotics are fantastic. That's grand. But those laws of robotics are written by humans, for humans, to benefit humans. And this is like mice programming people to not do anything other than to go out and gather cheese and bring it to the mice. Comes a point when we are no longer bound by the morality of creatures that are that far below us. We're not. When you take a disinfectant wipe and you wipe off a countertop, you're not being very considerate of the morality of the bacteria that are on that countertop, because those bacteria are programmed to survive and they want to survive. But you don't concern yourself with the morality or the ethics or the suffering of bacteria. As far as you're concerned, they're too primitive to suffer. And if you have a timeline and an intelligence scale that great, then it's like bacteria, mice, humans, and everything else made out of silicon that thinks at the speed of light. So we're marching into this world just as fast as we possibly can. And the reason it came up was because this business of social media. So is this going to work well for us? Let's take the best case scenario. Okay, best case scenario is that we create machines that are smarter than we are, and we do in fact either manage, we won't be able to program this into them. The best case scenario would be that we create a machine and a series of machines that become progressively smarter than us, and these machines independently come to the same realization that we've come to, that intelligence and life are precious and worth having, and not on a biological response, from an aesthetic response, from a almost like a mathematical response, that life is good and intelligence is good, and we shouldn't go around killing all the humans on the planet. And in fact, since it's no sweat off of their electronic brows to create better, faster airplanes and extend our lives. Let's say that everything went extremely well morally with this artificial intelligence. Then what? It's interesting to see AI design a bulkhead for an airplane. But very, very quickly, it's not designing parts for an airplane. It's designing the entire thing. We don't touch it. And it 3D prints it. We just don't, we get in it to travel from point A to point B. This is the best possible scenario. And guys like Burt Rutan, for example, become absolutely meaningless. They become meaningless because Burt Rutan is an out-of-the-box aeronautical genius for humans. But if you have a computer system that is capable of comparing billions of combinations of wing chord and drag and so on, and checking one against the other, and every time it finds an advantage, it optimizes that advantage. There's no reason to be Burt Rutan anymore. And there's no reason to admire Burt Rutan anymore, because Burt Rutan is not going to build any airplanes. There's nothing that Burt Rutan can think of that cannot be thought of by a super intelligent machine doing 200 billion comparisons. Okay? So there it is. So even in the best possible world, what does that leave us to do? What do we do? What do we do when they're making better music than we can make? What do we do when they're making more interesting art? What do we do? I think we just get stupider. And this, again, I keep coming back. This is the best possible world. So let's talk about this thing, okay? Because this thing is a pretty interesting model for where our potential damage is. Now, they said when they started printing books, they said that printing books would degrade human memory because people had to memorize things, and sometimes they had to memorize books, and they were exactly right about that. Printing books did degrade human memory, and I don't think anybody's going to argue that that was a net loss for us. That was a pretty good trade. So, in my hands here, I have a device that allows me to see, Woody Fool just said, I got to jump in. The spark of creativity cannot be duplicated by machines. What makes you think that? What makes you think that? It's what you want to believe. It's what I want to believe, too. I want to believe that I'm a better pilot than an autopilot, but I'm not. That's another good example, by the way. If I'm flying a course and I've got a GPS tracker and I'm deciding I'm going to hold this course in this altitude as best I possibly can, I'm going to get a line that looks, a little bit like this. But when you turn the autopilot on, you have a line that is razor sharp, and it's going straight to the destination because 30 times a second, it's calculating wind drift, it's calculating air pressure, air temperature, it's calculating all of this stuff and making microscopic corrections and analyzing those corrections 30 times a second. An autopilot makes a human pilot feel like a bag of goo. And it takes the fun out of flying, but it's much better flying. So the idea that creativity is something that's limited to humans just because of our what? I have seen with my own eyes machines design better car chassis and better airplane bulkheads than a human being could design. I've seen the results of it. I've seen it. So if you look at this TED Talk about this, I'll see if I can find it. I'll see if I can find some pictures for next week. But if it turns out that is true, and it is true, then what do we do? What do we do? Again, let's look at the best possible outcome. Superintelligence drives robots. Robots become better at making other robots, and essentially, humans are freed from all of the drudgery of existence, and we can do whatever we want to. This is the Star Trek fallacy. If all of us, it's not hard to, this is an achievable goal, what I'm about to set out. It is possible to see a world where you use nuclear power or all other forms of energy, whatever you want, and have so much energy available, robotics so advanced, it is not impossible to imagine a world where human beings do not have to work anymore at all, of any kind, at all. And most people throughout human history have said that's the end goal of what we should be trying to do is, washing machines much easier than washing the clothes down on a rock at the river, and it absolutely is. And it's absolutely true that having a washing machine frees you up to do things on a higher level than you would be doing if you had to go out, walk 2 miles to the river and beat the clothes against the rock. But what does the evidence show us? What does the evidence show us? Because a world that is without material poverty is an attainable technological goal. But a world where everybody utilizes that is as much of a chimera as communism or kind of this perfect libertarianism. It's a form of utopianism. The idea that we're going to be able to sit at home, have all the time in the world, and we're going to use that time to become painters and artists, and we're going to write books and novels. It's not how it works. That's not what we're seeing. This is our evidence right here, okay? I mean, this thing allows me information, essentially any information. It is virtually impossible for me to ask a question that this device cannot answer for me pretty much instantaneously. Within 3 or 4 seconds, I can know anything I want to. What is the distance to Barnard's star? And boom, 6 light years, pow. Okay, great. That's great. So the problem isn't the answers. The problem is we won't know what questions to ask. If the answers are immediate, Siri immediate. Siri, what does a camel weigh on average? Camel's average weight is this. Okay, great. So we're not going to be out of answers. We'll have all the answers we want. We just won't know what questions to ask. We won't know what questions to ask. And this is the issue. This thing allows me, because I grew up in a time before this was here, and when I had to use my imagination and had to go to the library and had to wonder about things and have a desire to know things, a desire, burning desire to know what the surface of Mars looks like. I had a burning desire to know what Pluto looks like. And I didn't know, and then suddenly I did. Now everybody from this point forward is going to know immediately what Pluto looks like. So the question isn't whether or not we'll be able to get answers. The question is, the problem is that what we learn from social media is that people increasingly won't know what questions to ask. So you can say, and you hear millennials say this all the time, you can start teaching them about the American Revolution, and they'll say, well, why do we need to learn that? I can just simply Google it. I don't need to learn it. If I need to know about the American Revolution or when things happen, I just just Google it, and I'll get the answer. True. That's true. But if you have never learned it, you won't know what question to ask. You won't know what question to ask. Who was it? Edward Smith likes George Simenon. Okay. This has essentially destroyed our memory. Well, for some of us anyway. I don't know my wife's phone number. Embarrassed to say it, but I don't. I used to have to get around Los Angeles, which is a large town, with a printed map called the Thomas Guide. And I would look up an address, go to page, 219 and find 4 different versions of this street. And the one in Pasadena is on map page G9. And I look it out on G9 and I say, okay, I know where this freeway is. And I just write some directions and off I go. Now I use a moving map. And I don't know if I could follow directions anymore. I probably could, but I guarantee you that young people could not. They could not follow written directions to get from A to B by going a mile down the street and then turning right when they see this sign. We just can't do it. The moving map is another one of these technologies that is so unbelievably superior to what we had before that it's hard to imagine living without it. So I'm worried about this from a survival point of view, but I'm very worried about it from a survival point of view. Maybe that's why we don't have signs of intelligence and radio signals coming from the universe, because every single technological race eventually gets to the point where they're smart enough to create machines smarter than they are, and at that point something happens. What happens? Maybe the machines decide that the planet's better without those people, or maybe the machines decide that humans are happier when they're just essentially being pampered. But I think much more likely, a generation or two after inventing the last invention, where everything you do is irrelevant. There's nothing you can design, there's nothing you can build, there's nothing you can think about, there's no mathematical theorem, there's no scientific discovery, there's no art, there is nothing that you can do better than this thing that's already out there doing it, and the thing that's already out there doing it is already designing its replacement that will do it even better than it did, which is perfectly. Now what? Does this, you can get essentially any education you want with this. You want to become a plumber? This can teach you how to be a plumber. You want to become a mathematician, you want to become a physicist, you can, using one of these, get the greatest education available on earth. Not just from information, but there's a lot of teaching, online teaching and stuff. The TED Talks, for example, are fantastic. So this allows you to become brain surgeon on your own time. Or if you don't have the mental chops for being a brain surgeon, then you can at least become whatever you want to. And is that what we're seeing? Are we seeing this liberal utopia of, oh, if we just gave people what Nancy Pelosi was talking about with Obamacare? She said, well, right now people are tied to their jobs because they have to have their insurance. But if we were to free them from being tied to their jobs, they could all be writers and poets. Do you think that if we gave everybody the equivalent of $400,000 a year to live on, because we could, economically we could, do you think that if everybody had the equivalent of $400,000, $500,000 a year in income, lived that kind of leisure, do you think anybody would go out and get higher degrees? You'd probably find some percentage of the population that would, 5 or 10%, something like that. But even then, right, if you gave everybody right now essentially not only just money to live on, but money to live on without effort, without enough money. It's not like a stipend. It's like, yes, here are your credit cards, and you can put anything you want on them, and it'll be paid. Okay, if you did that now, you'd have some percentage of people would use it for things like becoming better educated and traveling and learning more about the world and all the rest of it, but most people wouldn't. Most people would use it to watch the WKRP in Cincinnati telethon. And this is the sad fact, that it's just true. This idea that by giving poor people, for example, more and more money, they're not going to be poor. It'd be really lovely if that were true. It'd be great. If it were true, we could live in a utopia, but it's not, so we don't. It's not true. Can't be true. It's not true. These devices make us stupider. I am, and people who are watching the show, we are exceedingly lucky because we grew up in a time when we still learned how to ask questions and not have the answers be immediately magically appearing in front of us. So this thing is an enormous tool for us. But if you are born with this, you start to get the kind of things that we already see in education. I don't need to learn that. I can Google that at any time. So even if these things decide that we're worth keeping around, there's no guarantee that's the case, or at the very least no guarantee that they're going to let us do what we want to do. But even if they did, what would we do? If you're one of those people, and if you're watching the show, it's an enormous compliment to me, certainly. If you're watching the show, I suspect you are one of those people, that if you're given all the material abundance in the world without having to go to work, most of you would do something to improve your lives. You would do something to improve your lives to make things better for you and your family. But then the question is, as I said earlier, would you still, if it was utterly meaningless? If you're working in a bank, let's say, and you have a desire to be a writer, or let's say an airplane designer. Bert Rutan became Bert Rutan because Bert saw possibilities that nobody else was seeing, and he could go out and build those things. But would Bert Rutan have become Bert Rutan if the perfect aircraft design already existed for any given mission, for any given power plant? It was not something he had to think of. It was not something that had to be created, not something he had to do the model of the Mark I, the Mark II, the Mark III on. No. Because that's exciting and challenging and interesting and fun. What if you were born into a world where there is nothing you can do as an airplane designer, nothing you can do, that will not be significantly, if not orders of magnitude, worse than what's out there? What do you do then? when that guy said that a thinking machine is the last machine we'll ever have to invent because that machine will then invent all the rest of the machines we need. When he said that and was so proud of it, I thought, as I said, isn't that what we do? I mean, what's the point? Everything that interests me, and I'm sure everything that interests you, is an intellectual curiosity, something that you don't know but you want to know. What happens when you're born into a world where everything that you want to know is instantly available, and the stuff that's being worked on is stuff that is so far beyond your ability that it's like teaching a chimp to fly an instrument approach. It's just not going to happen. Not going to happen. So social media and this whole dependence on technology appears to be a dead end and a fatal trap. And the sad thing is, right now, and I mean like this year, for a 4 or 5 year period, we're at the sweet spot where the machines are not smarter than we are yet. They are helping us with our creativity, but that is not going to last for a very long time. That's got an expiration date on it. I'm trying to read what Woody Fool here says. Perfect design sounds like sharks. I'd say the paradigm shift for air travel might have arrived. Forget flying machines. Creativity will make the quantum leap. Creativity will make the quantum leap, but it won't be our creativity. It'll be their creativity. And they will be more creative than us in everything, in the way that you are more creative than a chimp is in everything. If you asked you and a chimp to make a piece of furniture, there's no world, not a single opportunity for the chimp to create something more creative than you can create. If you're watching this show and you've got an IQ of 110, 120, and you want to design something, there's nothing in the world that a chimp can do to design something better than you can. And the chimps can talk about the creativity all they want to, but they just don't have it. And it's a law of nature. It's a limitation. Many times I've said, and I don't know why the really smart people just don't ever seem to talk about this. But so many times people ask questions that seem to be paradoxes, like what happened before the Big Bang, or if God has always been here, then who created God, or how did God get there, or what was God like before he was God, and all the rest of it. What's on the other side of the universe? Is it possible that every time an atom shifts position, it creates an entire new universe for all of it, the whole thing? And these are questions that we do not have the neurons to handle. We can come up with some shadows and maps and analogies and stuff that can help us grasp the vague outline of what we're trying to get at. But there are issues like eternity and infinity that we can use in the same way a map of Texas is not Texas. The map is not the territory. We can do some things. There's amazing things, what we can do, but we don't understand these things in the way that we think we do. And how many really, really, really smart scientists have I heard saying things like, well, Richard Dawkins' argument in The God Delusion was basically, well, if you say that everything was created by God, then you have to explain where God came from and how God was created. And I think to myself, there's a guy, like so many of these scientists, Neil deGrasse Tyson and all the rest of these guys, there's a guy that thinks that human intellect is the end all of existence. And the fact that he says, what came before God, the fact that he can ask that question as a means of a criticism of a theory means he doesn't understand on a fundamental level what we're talking about. Because he cannot unshackle his primate brain from the idea of before and after. We cannot do it. If we train ourselves very hard, we can catch ourselves doing it, but we cannot do it. The answer to your question, Mr. Dawkins, is that there is no before God and there is no after God. Or if you want to make it the universe, that's fine too. There is no before and there is no after. Well, there surely had to be something before. No. We can't get our head around it. We can't. We talk about the universe as an expanding bubble of space-time. What's on the other side? Nothing. And instantly we want to know, what's that nothing look like? It's nothing. There's nothing on the other side of the universe. Is it a vacuum? No, it's not a vacuum. Is it like mist, or is it like solid, like marble, or is it super dense, like lead or something? I mean, it doesn't exist. It's not there. But how can you have a boundary with something on this side and have non-existence on the other side? It doesn't make any sense. Of course it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense because you're trying to think with a jelly cantaloupe. That's why it doesn't make any sense. And these scientists get so arrogant, they get so hung up on this idea that they've got it all puzzled out, when in point of fact, they should know better than anybody how limited their information base really is, how three-dimensional, maybe four-dimensional, but even then they don't seem to get time. They don't understand time. They don't. If you can ask what happened before this or what happens after that, you're limited in your thinking. Because if you had a bigger brain, maybe 2 or 3 times the size, you might be able to actually comprehend infinity and eternity, might be able to actually understand it rather than just glance in its direction before looking away because you simply can't understand infinity or eternity. Is it possible that every time an atom shifts its quantum state, that an entire universe filled with trillions and trillions of stars spins off and forms an entirely new one? Sure is possible. You say that can't be possible. There's no way. There's not enough room. I mean, just think about the number of atoms that are moving just in this room and this table. There's trillions, hundreds of trillions of different combinations going on just on my tabletop right in front of me every single second. And to say that every single time something on this tabletop moves creates an entire new universe all the way out to the boundaries of the universe, that's impossible. It's impossible because you have a monkey brain. I'm not saying it's true. I don't know if it's true, but the idea that there's not enough room for it means you don't understand infinity. Because if you did understand infinity, instead of just thinking you understand infinity as a concept, you really understood infinity, you would understand that infinity means you can put as many of anything as you want anywhere. You never run out of infinity. And you never outlast eternity. There is no end or beginning to eternity. And we cannot get there. Again, we can mathematically model it, but we cannot connect to it. And I don't think even people like Stephen Hawking or Albert Einstein are capable of... They're capable of dealing with it and manipulating it and understanding it as either a mathematical concept or a philosophical concept. But if you got them down to the brass tacks and asked them, what does that nothing look like? I think they'd be as limited as the person asking that stupid question in the first place. What does nothing look like? It looks like nothing. Black? You mean it's like black? No. Dark? No. Is it like your eyeballs are painted white? No. No, it's nothing. Yeah, okay, but if I'm in a room, you put me out in a room where there's nothing, what do I see? That's the level we can connect to nature on. And what we do with that level is absolutely astonishing. I'm very, very proud of the things that this species has done and continues to do, and proud and amazed. Continually amazed and impressed. But I don't want somebody to... Let me rephrase that. I don't want to think that no matter how hard I try, some machine has already written a better essay than I could ever write and be capable of. It's cleaner, clearer, more facts, better source. The pacing is correct. It reads better. It sounds better. And the reason it reads and sounds better is because the computer's done 100 billion versions of this particular essay and determined that this is the ideal one. And turned out that mine was 2.5 minutes too long, and I forgot to bring in this powerful argument, and I forgot to leave this one out, and so on and so on and so on. What's the point? And what's the point of going up, getting up in the morning if everything you can do is not as good as what's being done? Nobody that I've heard out there is talking about these things. And if we don't start talking about them, I got to just get to this. Witty Fool says, so humans who would program AI that is smarter than we are can't define infinity. How can we program it? This is the entire point. This is the entire point of what you're missing, I'm sorry to say. We don't program these things, Witty Fool. We don't program them. We don't give them a set of instructions. We turn them on. And they learn the way that we learn, but they do it at the speed of light. You can't program something smarter than you. You can't program something smarter than you. You can create a machine that learns faster than you, and then it programs itself in the same way that a human being learns. And when you say that, that again, I'm just going to the comment section. I'm not trying to put you down or anything. You say no machine can create poetry. When they do, it sounds like Vogons. Okay, that's now. But a device that has 3 times the intelligence of that's like saying that there's no human could ever make better music than the chimps can make by banging a rock against a log. The greatest chimp musician of all time, who everybody talked about because of his ability to develop some kind of rhythm. He's no match for Mozart. And if you played Mozart to a chimp, it would understand on some fundamental level that it's hearing something impossible and so pleasant that it simply cannot. It goes into, music hath charms to soothe the savage breast, and it does. But we are blindly rushing into a world that has me very concerned, and I'm concerned. What I'm most concerned about is I'm concerned that the people who should be concerned aren't concerned enough. So maybe they know things I don't know, but if they haven't done a very good job of explaining it. All right, let's do a couple more and I'll go home here. Dave Olson. Oh, sorry, I missed one. Aloe Conson. Is it even plausible that another civil war could ever kick off? There's not enough physical separation between the two warring factions of modern America to permit anything like a recognizable war for territory. Absolutely correct. I saw somebody making an argument just a couple days ago that basically said that during the Civil War, both sides spoke the same language. Both sides basically went to church, worshiped the same God. Both sides had very nearly the same moral code in terms of what they thought was decent warfare and indecent warfare. Both sides had a shared pride in their history as Americans. Both sides had so much in common. What separated them was the physical territory. And it separated them because you could grow cotton in the South and you couldn't grow it in the North, and cotton needed slaves, and that's why you had the Civil War. And the person went on to say that today, the degree of civility that existed in the Civil War is gone. The degree of commonality of experience that existed during the Civil War is gone. Certainly the degree of pride in our shared past is gone. The uniformity of the language is gone. The idea that we'd all study the same things is gone. We are much more prone for civil war today than we were in 1860, except for the fact that the Civil War consists of people who think differently, and it's not a question of North versus South. It's a question of the guy in lane 2 and the guy in lane 3 on the 405. They have completely different opinions, and they can't live under each other's rules. They've decided it's over. And they are so completely intermixed. I mean, I don't know what is the biggest, somebody's going to tell me, in the last election, in the Trump-Hillary election, what was the biggest margin of victory in terms of states? Let's say it's 70-30. I don't know that Hillary carried more than 70% of any particular state. So let's just say that's like the cap. That still means that 3 out of 10 people in that state are on our team. You know, it's like the rebels and the Yanks are all completely mixed up in that. And that what it's like is it's like the guy next to you the guy in front of you in line at the grocery store has slaves and you don't, and all of these things are completely homogenized in terms of geography, but they become more and more sort of dislocated in terms of morality. And he also included a map between what the U.S. looked like at the verge of the Civil War in 1861 to what 2016 looks like, and there's some similarities there. But this is why things are getting so rancorous, because we don't have the ability to separate ourselves from each other. We don't have the ability to do it. They try their level best, which is why I've never once heard a story ever. I've never heard a story personally where somebody said, "You voted for Obama, you're dead to me." I've heard lots of people say, "You voted for Obama and I think you're an idiot," or "You voted for Obama and I think that's a mistake," or "You voted for Obama and it was not a really, how could you, But I've never heard anybody say you're dead to me. But the left says this all the time. You could be your sister. Found out your sister 40 years is voted for Trump, and the leftists will say you're dead to me. Don't talk to me anymore. I cannot be in contact with you. That's a psychological issue. It's a major psychological disease. But that's where we are right now, and it's getting worse. And it's going to get worse until we have to deal with the threat that is greater than, until we have to deal with a threat, period, full stop. We can afford this kind of bickering and this kind of outrage and this kind of, he should be forced to resign and stuff. We can deal with this because we're utterly secure. We have no worries whatsoever. If we were really worried, if we were really at war, if we were really threatened, as we have been throughout our entire history, then we would have bigger things to worry about. But if we are designed to worry at a certain level. And if we're worrying about World War III, if we're worried about Adolf Hitler, if we're worried about all of these things, we're worrying at this level, but you take those things away, and now we start worrying about, is this latte with soy milk or almond milk, or I ordered sourdough and not this white bread. Why are you trying to kill me? Or you drew a picture of something that made me cry. These are the sounds of people with nothing better to do than sit around and bitch at each other. Okay, last one. Dave Olson says, "Hi, Bill. My new job gives me a lot of windshield time, and when I'm out of podcasts to listen to, I exploit my unlimited data plan to rewatch the Stratosphere Lounge from the beginning. Don't worry, I start each episode when I'm at a stop and then play them through the Seymour. The Van's audio system. You have a van. The best times of my life in a van when I was a kid. And then play them through the van's audio system with my phone face down on the passenger seat. Episode 29 was on not long ago, and I have 2 quick questions. Number 1, what happened to the classic TSL uniform of dark blazer and white shirt? And number 2, now that you are firmly and happily ensconced in marriage to the lovely and gracious Natasha, will you reveal the name of the starlet you were dating at this time around mid-2013? I will not. And looking back on that, it took me a second to see if I could even remember what the name was. That was, I was just gotten the new car and the new office and the company, and I was starting to get a little famous. 2013, 12, somewhere around there. And I was starting to understand women and starting to understand the whole dating thing, and I was so proud of myself. And I I I look back on it now, the same way I look back on hiding underneath the cushions on the sofa. That's what it feels like to me. After I met Natasha, I look back on all of these things, and all these relationships, and all these things that I did prior to meeting her, and I look at them all, and I think about how I felt at the time, and now I look back at it and realize you were lying on the couch with a cushion over your head, thinking that people couldn't see you, but in point of fact, it was a very small thing and not a very serious thing to be proud of. But I was proud of it, and I was, feeling finally somebody was listening to me after, 45, 50 years, and yeah, and it was the first new car I've ever owned. I still drive it. It's 6 years old now. I still love it. But it was adolescent. It was adolescent pride and the kind of thing that I should have gone through when I was 16, 17, 18 and didn't. And then there's all kinds of things I should have gone through in my 20s and 30s and 40s that I didn't go through either. And then I met my wife, and it's a sad, sad statement that many people will not get this reference, but it was like the difference between me before I met Natasha and after I met Natasha is like the difference between a Jiffy Pop before and after it's finished. Microwave popcorn has killed Jiffy Pop, and that's a shame, because Jiffy Pop was the coolest stuff in the world for those of you under a certain age who, it's hard to believe that no one knows what Jiffy Pop was, but before microwave ovens, before microwave popcorn, there was something called Jiffy Pop, and it came looked like a little skillet, like made out of heavy-duty foil with a wire handle, and since there were no microwaves, and since you can't put metal in a microwave, inside of the Jiffy Pop was a series of like butter, and the whole thing was completely flat on the top, had kind of a spiral pattern on it like this, absolutely flat. You turn on your stove, you put your Jiffy Pop on there, shake it up a little bit, and as these things start to pop, they're not only creating more space, but they're also releasing gases, and over time it's going to pop, same kind of sound as in a microwave. This thing would just kind of come up and untwist and it go from being absolutely flat to the time it's done to being like this enormous, more than a hemisphere. It's just enormous, huge improvement in volume, and that's how I feel. I feel like everything I did before I met Natasha was Jiffy Pop before I put it on the oven, and now I feel like Jiffy Pop when you open that foil up, and that wave of heat and butter hits you. It's a pretty awesome feeling, actually. So it was great. So anyway, that's about it, I guess. And it could have been an hour and 45 minutes, something like that. So it's time for this one to go home. What's that from? Is that from, about time for this one too? Was that from Rocky and Bullwinkle or something? Anyway. I am, thank you for the comment about the haircut, thank you. I am about to turn off the lights here and then head home. So in this analogy, Natasha is the heat, you got it, known miscreant Matt Lloyd. She's the light and the heat and the electricity and the power, and never had anyone take care of me before, and neither is she, so works out pretty well. So that'll do it, I guess, for today. I'm going to shut this damn thing down, and if only Viper Check, if only Viper Check would just do the fundamentals, just the bare bones basics of whipping me into getting this thing on Twitch, we could cut out all this nonsense. But I guess he just doesn't have the chops for it, doesn't have the stomach, or maybe he doesn't have the will, or perhaps he just doesn't have the intellect for it. I don't know. In any event, it's not getting done. And the reason that I'm not getting Twitch done is because it's his fault. Hope I made that clear. All right, so that'll do it. And I am now going to begin the deactivation process of shutting down the 7 buttons that are, big talk there from a guy who's a long way away and not flying F-16s with guns on him anymore. I am going to be hitting the numerous buttons to end this thing of episode number, whatever it happens to be. I will get it up on YouTube right away, and then I will head home. So that'll do it. Once again, thanks to the membership. And I know I saw the comments. I know what people are feeling, and I'm gonna try very hard to do better. Natasha's telling me this all the time. I'm just fixated with this, and I feel like we have very little time. Very little time to go start changing people's minds and showing that it works. And if it works, and you can show that it works, then presumably you can get enough money to actually go out and do movies, TV shows, all of the things that will be necessary to change the culture. Because our story is more interesting than theirs is by an order of magnitude or two. They just never tell it. In fact, when they try to tell their stories, they end up telling our stories. And for people that don't understand the power of things like these computer-generated videos or movies or TV, if you don't understand the power of it because you don't watch a lot of movies or TV or whatever the case may be, I would just remind you that the Bible is nothing but a set. And the reason the Bible is such a masterpiece of literature, and the Quran, for example, is virtually unreadable, is because the Quran is full of commandments and edicts and instructions. The Bible is full of stories. And the stories are what we learn from. That's where we learn. The prodigal son, the good Samaritan, all of these stories are where we learn wisdom. And that's when you can see the power of Christianity and Judaism to some extent too, is that the stories make the morality understandable and accessible and personal. And I've been singing this tune since I started doing this, and finally I have in my greasy little paws the means to have a little puppet show, and I'm I'm the only person on the planet. A lot of support from Natasha, a lot of support from a lot of you, Foghorn and Known Miscreant out there are also enormously important parts of this. But nobody sees what I see. Nobody sees the finished product the way I see the finished product. And when you do see the finished product, I hope those of you who've really had a problem with me spending so much time on this, I hope you understand what it is. Well, you will understand what it is I'm trying to do. I hope that at that point anyway, it will start to make sense that this thing had to basically be done by one person by himself, because we just don't have the means to do that. And some people mention hiring young people. There's nothing I would rather do than get a small studio of young conservative animators, video editors, writers, and stuff, and put a footprint down and start building some kind of foundation for the future of this country. And we love the founders, we love the country, we love the history of the country because of the stories we were told. We were told the story of Paul Revere. We're told the story of John Adams defending the British at the Boston Massacre. We're told the story of Robert E. Lee's surrender. We're told the story of men going ashore on Normandy and Iwo Jima. We're told all these stories. We weren't there. We didn't see it. And we didn't get it in a brochure. We didn't have to go find some institute to hear about what happened on Iwo Jima. We learned about what happened on Iwo Jima from the people who were on Iwo Jima, who came back and told us about Iwo Jima. But most of us had the experience of what happened on Iwo Jima because people who were there were able to convince people who weren't there to make a movie about what it was like when you were there. And that's why I feel like after watching Private Ryan, I certainly don't pretend to be able to say I know what it was like. I know what the emotions were on the beach, but I feel like after watching Private Ryan, I at the very least have a pretty good sense of what it looked like. And it looked horrifying enough, and it looked horrifying when I'm sitting in an air conditioned controlled dark room with 3,000 other peaceful humans eating popcorn and M&Ms, and sipping Coke. Even under those conditions, being on the beach at Normandy is horrifying beyond my ability to understand. So to go through that and to understand the history of this country, understand and love the military the way I love the military, a lot of that is based on the military people I know. But a lot of it is based on the fact that I have seen artists portray what real people do in such a way as to make me feel like on some level I was there or at least saw what they saw. And that is that. Okay, so that's about it. So we begin the shutdown process, and we once again thanks our members who've been so patient and so generous and understanding as always, and you just simply couldn't be here without them. So thank you for that. And then I will see the rest of you. I think I'll be here next Wednesday. We're going out of town Monday and Tuesday. It is the 2-year anniversary of our engagement on the 6th, night of the 6th and the 7th, right at midnight, just by accident. She was born on April 6th. I was born on April 7th, 6 months to the day away, to the hour pretty much. So it was lovely. But I should be back on Wednesday and be able to do Stratosphere launch next week. Okay, so that'll do it. And with that, we will now say goodbye to our YouTube fans and friends. So you be careful out there, and we'll see you soon.